Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator. I'm all about capturing and curating career and life stories as a meaningful way to celebrate a milestone moment like a big O birthday, anniversary, retirement, or graduation. And I'm at my best when curating photo books that move your memories from the basement or your phone or your computer to the coffee table, giving you and your family and friends access to these treasured memories for years to come. I also love curating and capturing life and career stories through this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? It's a series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing my friend Candice Kingston. Welcome, Candice.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Candice and I met through our Strategic Connections chapter through Colorado Thought Leaders Forum. And Candice is a leadership and success coach. And so we've kind of just hit it off in our group. And so we were lunching last week and I said, hey, why haven't I gotten you on the podcast yet? So before we jump into today's interview, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Life Story Curator, a testimonial from one of their very happy clients.
Oh my gosh, if you're considering hiring Kathy Lawless to do a book for you, you need to do it. My name is Ann DuPont, and I'm Chair Emeritus of a nonprofit that's been based in Denver called the Leadership Investment. And after 20 plus years of being in business, we decided we had to celebrate and commemorate all of the great work we'd done and the impact we'd had in the Denver community. So we hired Kathy Lawless and Life Story Curator to help us do exactly that. And I've got to tell you, the result has been simply outstanding. We went into it with a little bit of fear, thinking, is this going to be too much work? Can we really take this on? And Kathy just made it absolutely painless. She was fun. She was creative. She broke the work into bite-sized pieces that we could really take hold of and get done. And she just made it a lot of fun. We had a lot of laughter along the way. And the feedback from the members of our organization, from the staff, the community, the volunteers, has simply been outstanding. It has really done quite a remarkable job of capturing the essence of everything we achieved over 20 years. So if you're thinking about doing something like this for your organization, for your career, for your family, I would highly recommend it, and I would absolutely say that Kathy Lawless and Life Story Curator is the person for you.
Before we get into what it's like to be a leadership and success coach, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions. So tell us where you grew up, what part of the country or what part of the world, and a little bit about your family dynamics, birth order, and how you think, birth order and geographic location kind of shaped you as a person.
That's such a great question. So I was actually born in Cape Town, South Africa, and my parents and my family, my brothers and I, immigrated to the States when I was almost 4. So it's been quite a while, but we would go back and visit my grandparents and family over the years and got to know South Africa pretty well. And then my husband and I lived in Botswana for 2 years before we got married. So we were familiar with that Southern Africa area. Birth order, I'm the baby. I have 2 older brothers. One had passed away about 9 years ago, and he was developmentally disabled. So it was a little bit of a different birth order type dynamic. I think my middle brother really became that big brother and, older brother kind of thing. And maybe I was still the baby, right? So I've always been the baby, but I laugh. My husband and I talk about this a lot. He's also the baby out of 3. And so we joke that we're both the third born. And so we are not type A. We sit around and talk about things a lot and don't get much done. So I don't know if that's indicative of the third born or the baby. I'm not sure, but I think it is. We like to think that we're the same because of that. So I don't know a ton about birth order, except middle children. I think I know a lot about because of my middle child that I have. That's a whole nother story, but I do think he's a very typical middle child. So I'm not sure about babies. But anyway, that's kind
All
of
right. Well, that's awesome. You know, what's interesting. My husband and I are both second borns. So we're
okay.
both middle. So I'm a middle of
Interesting.
3 and he's like the second of 4. So he was in
Uh-huh.
that middle zone. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. Because we are
Yeah.
not the type A either.
No.
Getting things done. We're very much, we talk through it and decision, kind of
Uh-huh.
analysis paralysis almost.
Yeah. And I think in my case, the middle, or I mean, the baby, I think the middle can be a peacekeeper, but I think the baby can too. So I think I took on that role of the good girl. I had a very naughty older brother. So I was always the one who was like, oh, I won't cause my parents any problems. I'll do everything right. And I had that mentality probably until like last year. So
Until last, and now you're breaking all the rules
I'm
and you're
breaking all the rules.
running amok.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I gotta say, this birth order question has always been so fascinating, and I can't tell you how many people I interview who are firstborns, and it's really been cool to see the patterns and to hear they have so much in common. They're so similar, but then I will say when you get into the middles and the thirds and fourths, especially like a fifth of 8, and some of those dynamics are really really interesting.
I had a client who was the 10th or something
Oh
out
wow.
of 10. She was the baby. And I think she had, I don't know if she had all brothers, but definitely a lot of brothers. And she's a 5 foot tall Latina woman. And she said, you better watch out. She's like, I am the youngest and I will like cut you. Like I am tough. So she's like, I might look short, but I'm mighty. I'm like, whoa, okay.
And she had to find her way probably and fight her way to
Had to be
the dinner
scrappy.
table and to be heard and all of that, right?
All
Oh,
of that.
geez.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did you do for fun as a young person then? Were you into sports or dance or theater, all of the above?
Kind of all of the above. I did a little bit of everything. I never really had one, true love. Although when I was about 10 or I guess 12, I think I started sailing, racing Hobie cats with my dad. So my dad always was a big sailor, and my older brother used to sail with him. And then he kind of got too old for that and didn't want to do it anymore. He's 4 years older than me. So there's a little bit of a gap. And then when I was 12, my dad took me on as his crew, and we started sailing Hobie cats and racing them together. And then when I was about, I think 16, I ended up skippering the boat, and he was my crew, and we won that year, like that fleet or that division or whatever, which was really fun. Of course, I had him as my crew, but he was basically telling me what to do probably most of the time because he really knew what to do. I would just happen to be in the back steering and handling the mainsail, but that was really fun and something I cherish that memory as a child because it was a really special time, and a special time with my dad. We spent a lot of time bobbing up and down with no wind in the lakes in Colorado, but we had a lot of good times together, a lot of good talks. So
yeah, that's an interesting sport. Not
yeah,
one you hear of very much, especially in Colorado.
exactly.
You don't have a lot of water.
He grew up in Cape Town, so he would sail every single day of his life in the ocean. And then I think he just felt like he had to make the most of it here. So what can I do here? We'll get a small boat.
I'm glad you mentioned where he grew up, because I was wondering what took your parents to Cape Town, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's not something very common that you hear about.
Yeah, so they were both born there, and my mom's parents had immigrated from England as missionaries. And then my dad's parents, I always forget, I think they were born there too, but their parents have like a European ancestry. I don't know. I'm terrible at remembering all the stories. My aunt tells me a ton of stories, and every time I say, I need to write this down, I'm not good at remembering where everyone's from and all these things, but pretty much just a South African family.
Yeah. And then you went from South Africa to Colorado?
Yep. So my dad's sister had already immigrated here a few years before us, and then he got his green card and was like through their sponsorship basically, and was able to come. And he wanted to finish his master's degree and really just get us away from apartheid. I mean, it was a terrible time there, and we came in 79, and apartheid didn't end until 94. So the year I graduated high school, which is just crazy. But that whole time, my dad just wanted a better life for us, basically.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, the whole immigration stories are so cool to hear, the courage it takes to uproot your whole life and something and go to a whole different country, and different times of lives, and then
Yeah.
different financial factors. I mean, there's so many things that make that
Yeah.
a courageous move, right?
Yeah, there's a lot to it for sure.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to shift gears just a little bit here. Are you an introvert, an extrovert, or an ambivert?
Oh, I love this question because it depends who I talk to. And I say that because some people get it, that what you are in that context is based on how you get your energy. And so what gives me energy is being by myself. So if I'm in a big party or a networking group or whatever it is, I love that, but I have to go home for like not 3 hours, but for a while, and just sit by myself, or go do something quiet, or go work by myself, or whatever it is. But I can only do that party thing for a short amount of time. And I definitely get my energy back from being alone. So I would say I'm an introvert by that definition. By anyone else's definition, I'm an extreme extrovert because I love talking to anyone and everyone, and strangers in the grocery line. I'll talk to anyone. So by that definition, you would look at me and say, most people would say, oh, she's totally an extrovert. So that's why I kind of say, jokingly, it depends who I'm talking to. I would probably define myself as an ambivert, to be honest, just because of that back and forth and difference, Yeah.
Well, I love how you broke down those definitions. Those are perfect, because I mean, that's the thing is I was going to say, and why I asked this question, because I feel like I know you, and I would have called you an extrovert straight up because of how you show up, and how we're always, like in the bigger group, or even when we're one-on-one, how I see you. So that's good to know that you do need to come home and recharge. That's me too. I love being out and about. And when I was in corporate, I realized, I was out and about all the time. So I needed way more introverted and recharging time. And now that I'm a solopreneur, I need way more social time.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of funny. You do get in those, I get in those funks where, especially during COVID, right? But you end up working by yourself for so long. And then all of a sudden I'm just like, I haven't seen anyone besides my family for days. I haven't even left the house. I haven't driven anywhere. Do I even own a car? Why do I have a car? Like, let's, go do something. Got to go meet somebody. So it's fun to have a group like ours that we can just tap into and say, hey, you want to go to lunch? Like, let's go do something.
Usually we can find someone, right?
Exactly.
Pick me. Okay, so on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being life of the party, where do you put yourself?
Oh gosh, I would say 90% of the time I'm a 5.
I would say you might be bumping up against a 7, which is why I love having you in our group, because you bring such great energy.
Oh yeah, no, I actually think gosh, that's a hard one. When I'm out, I'm a 5. Like, I like to have, that's the life of the party, right? I like to have, is that the life of the, I forget which scale went. Okay. So when I'm out and with people, I definitely enjoy it and like to have fun and like to talk to everyone and make sure to work the room. And, oh, I didn't talk to that group over there. Sometimes you get stuck with like one person and you think, oh, we wasted this whole time. I wanted to really talk to everyone. But when I'm not, I'm very quiet, and I'm very much a homebody and to myself. I mean, my husband and I talk a lot. We sit around and drink coffee a lot. I like to color my little mandala things and knit and read. And I don't know, I'm a very boring, like, old lady. So when I'm home, I'm an old lady. When I'm out, I'm fun. And like,
you're home and recharging, couch potato when you're out and about, life of the party. Okay, I see. I'm seeing these extremes with you.
Yeah, right? They're pretty extreme.
Okay, on the risk meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low risk taker, 5 being a high risk taker, how do you see yourself as a risk taker?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. And I think I'm a pretty low risk taker, but not no risk. No, does that make sense? I like a little risk.
So you're a 2, you're not a 1.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe a 2. That's probably a good number. 2. And I think my idea of risk is, maybe trying one new thing that year. I really try to push myself more than that, though, because while my kids were growing up, I would always say to them, it's okay to be, new at something. It's okay to suck at something at first. Everybody does. Everybody is not good at, when they first try something. And then we're still talking about, again, like we talk a lot, and then we finally maybe do something, but we've been talking a lot about taking a trip to South Padre Island to do kite surfing as a family, which means mom has to do it too. And I'm thinking, can't I do yoga on the beach or something? And they said, no, you have to try. And so I finally had to kind of put my, what do they say? Put your foot where your mouth is, and actually put that to action. So I'll keep you posted on if that actually happens, but that would be very risky for me.
Because it's funny, they're pushing mom to do it, but mom also has to probably book the reservations and make it happen. So you could be like,
yeah,
just keep dragging your feet and then.
Oh yeah. Well, no, that was the problem. My husband made the reservation.
Oh, he made the reservation. Oh, okay.
So he kept saying, are you in? Are you in? Are you out? Just let me know. I don't mind either way, but I need to know so I can book it. And so I was trying to be all brave. I'm like, yeah, just book it. Go for it. And then of course he's paid. I'm like, oh, can I back out now? And yeah, anyway, we'll see.
Well, and you're thinking about, I should be a role model for my kids, that you should try new things and not everybody sucks.
I know. That's a tough one.
You gotta walk your talk.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, Candice, let's talk a little bit about what it's like to be a leadership and success coach. And then we'll get into, how did I get here?
Okay. So for me, being a coach is really a tool. It's not necessarily a title or a job, right? So I use coaching as a tool. And I say that because people hear the word coach. And first of all, these days it triggers people and they think everyone's a coach, which is probably true, especially after COVID and people lost their jobs. They all decided to be a coach, which I say half jokingly, but I've been a coach for about I think it's going on 7 or 8 years now. And we'll talk about how I got into it. But as far as what I do now, it really is working with people to break down their limiting beliefs. We all have these thoughts that hold us back, and that's just one roadblock. There's others, but the main one are those limiting beliefs. And we put ourselves into these stories that we tell ourselves that are the truth. And we tell ourselves, this is the way things are. I can't see it another way. And when I am able to talk to somebody and help them understand and kind of enlighten themselves, really, by dreaming and just kind of brainstorming or talking through something, how there are so many other possibilities out there. And what are those opportunities and possibilities for that person when they start to look at their life through a different lens? It's all about shifting that energy, shifting the way they're looking at things, that perspective and attitude. And that's how I get people to move through that. So coaching is the tool to do that. I also do some consulting and some teaching, if you will. I won't call it therapy because you and I talked about that the other day. There's definitely a difference, and I won't get into all of that now, but there's a time and a place for all of those things. I'm not a therapist though. So if somebody needs that, I typically will recommend, hey, you seem a little bit more stuck. Why don't you get some deeper help? Typically with coaching, we're all about moving forward. So if the person is ready for that, we can get you, going and get you moving to that next thing. And what's really fun is working with teams and organizations on this, and working with companies that might be feeling stuck in whether it's their teamwork or a specific team, or maybe there's a manager that's having a hard time rallying people to get going. What is that? How do we keep people motivated and successful? And oftentimes that can come down to some of those roadblocks or those limiting beliefs or stories that people have been telling themselves. So that's how I work.
I love that. I love that. It's a tool. It's not a title. And it's about getting people unstuck. And that's exactly what this podcast is for, right?
Yeah,
and so
I love it.
To have you on today is that, I think back to when I was, stuck and in transition, that this is exactly what I did. I had all those self-limiting beliefs. I'd apply for something or I get excited about something, then I wouldn't let myself get excited because it seemed like if I got excited, then it was crickets and I never heard anything. And then that was, the ups and downs. So, and then, you get kind of immobile and then you stop taking action. And yeah, there's all the things we've been talking about. So anyway, so it's so great to have someone like you that I can refer people to and, help them if they are, feeling stuck. So on that note though, did you always want to be a leadership and success coach? When you look at junior high, high school, and you're like, oh, what do I want to be when I grow up? Was coach in the picture?
Kind of. And I say, I mean, I definitely didn't know that name or that term. From a very young age, I wanted to be a teacher. So way back when, I mean, probably when I played as a little girl, I always had a list. I'd make my mom write down some kids' names, and that would be my role taking list. You know, before I could even write, I would sit on the stairs, and we had the stairs that have like a little hole in them. You know what I mean? Like the back doesn't have
you can see, you can see through. Yeah,
so I would sit there with my legs through there, and that would be my desk. And I would have a little notebook, and I would take roll, and I'd call everyone's names, and I'd play school for hours. I mean, I can remember doing that for hours, and I always wanted to be a teacher. And all through school, I befriended every teacher. I would go back and visit. I would help them grade papers. I mean, it was a pretty clear path until one day, my good friend, who was my 5th grade teacher, still a close friend, still somebody I send Christmas cards to, at least. I won't say close friend, but I've kept in touch with her all these years. And we used to go to lunch together. We used to house sit for her, and we were very close with her. And we were on a walk one day when I was in high school. And she said, you know, and it's kind of depressing, but she said, this was, you know, maybe 92 or something. She said, you know, being a teacher is really hard. There are parents that just don't care. And she didn't have kids, so her school children were always her kids. Anyway, she went on to say, parents don't care. We're getting kids who have fetal alcohol syndrome, or they were born with drug abuse, or all these issues and attention deficit, and da 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 da. And I just think you should do something else. And my heart was broken. I couldn't believe it. I just thought, and I mean, I didn't have to listen to her, but I definitely did. I mean, I took it to heart because she was somebody I really respected. And I remember just being heartbroken and thinking, well, okay, well, that's that. You know, what else can I do? And I still think maybe in the back of my mind, I thought I could end up teaching, but I was really at a loss for what to do. And fast forward, I mean, I met my husband when I was 20, and we joke because at the time I said I was going to college and I wanted to be an architect. And I don't even know where that came from. I liked art, but that's about it. And he said, oh, so you're really good at math? And I was like, wait, what? You have to know math? I mean, this is how naive I was. At 20, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So anyway, I did go to college, and I just settled on psychology because I did really love that part of educating, teaching the mind. How does it work? How, you know, our emotions and all of that stuff, mental health, all those things were really interesting to me. And then when I graduated, I had a disconnect between really wanting to be a psychologist or a therapist. I didn't want to go to grad school right away, and you need that, unfortunately. And I also didn't really want to listen to people complain all day. That part was hard. And to think about listening to their traumas. I mean, therapists, they go deep. They're talking about heavy stuff. Yeah. And I was really afraid that energetically I couldn't take that on. I would have a hard time separating. And I know you learn to do that, and that's part of, you know, what you learn in grad school, but I just had a hard time with that. So I put the grad school on hold. I thought maybe when my kids are older, I could go back to grad school. Says no one ever. I think that's a really hard thing to do. I think probably knew that in the back of my mind. But in the meantime, well, do you want me to tell you what came next, or is that?
Well, yeah, well, let me just ask you a question here. So, you know, this is what's so interesting for, I think, young people, right? Is that, you know, you're expected to know what you want to do and go be that, right? And like you had teacher, and then that bubble got burst, and then you're like, well, I'll be an architect because that sounds cool, but you really have no idea what that means, right?
What it takes.
And then all of a sudden that bubble's like, oh no. So then, you know, then you finally went into, well, what do I really want to learn about? Which is really cool, the psychology aspect. But then you get done with that and you're like, oh crap. Well,
I can't get a job. No,
these jobs don't seem interesting, even though I'm interested in psychology, the jobs available. So it's very, I got to tell you, as a young person, how do we ever figure this out? And we just kind of keep marching through. So,
and as parents, you know, it's such a hard line. It's like, I want to tell them, pick something and go for it. and then maybe you'll change your mind. But do you really want your kid to waste like 6 years of their lives going to college, finding a job, getting started, and then saying, oh, I don't like this? And we do hear of that a lot. So it's a fine line to really, what do you encourage your kid? You should get the degree, you shouldn't. I don't know. It's a tough one, especially now knowing what I do. But I also, anyway, that's a tough one.
Well, and it's funny, because you do have to be open to opportunities too, of what's available to you. I mean, I remember my sister was in business. She was working at American Express in their money order division. And at one point I got very frustrated with my career, and I called her one day and I just said, can you get me a job? And so I was really at a point of, I just want out of here. And I was kind of teasing, but she calls me back that afternoon. You have an interview tomorrow morning. We have a supervisor position open. And I was already a supervisor. So, but it's being open to that opportunity of going, I don't really care where. So I end up in this money order world. I ended up actually in MoneyGram, which was a new product that American Express was launching. But, I never set it out to be in payment processing or in the financial services industry. But it's interesting, how do you stay open to things? And then that led to a amazing career for me in terms of, so it wasn't about what I was doing. It was about kind of who I became, because it gave me leadership, management, learning new things, working with people. I mean, so it doesn't matter where, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. That's great.
So I don't know how you do. I'm not a parent, so I don't know how you do that, because you also don't want them, maybe it's your money, spending the money on something. They're like, you're never going to use this, or how are you going to make money? So
yeah, pretty much.
so what was your first job then, once you got the psychology degree and you're trying to
so my first job, I mean, I had a few, obviously just little jobs here and there. And then my first, I would say, real job was in sales. I got a job somehow as selling oxygen. So for medical devices.
I'm sorry. So that's fine.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
I know. Here, have some air. It's like selling ice to Eskimos, right? Here, have some oxygen. I've got some right here. Thanks. I'm good.
I'm good.
So I had to call on physicians' offices, primarily pulmonary doctors, general practitioners, things like that, and say, when you prescribe oxygen, please use our service. And 9 times out of 10, they would say, oh, no, thanks. We've got a service. We're good. But every once in a while I'd get in there and make a good connection and be able to sway them over to our services. And the fun part about that job actually was I didn't just go sell to the doctors, and that was the hard part, but I would go visit the patients that they would sign up. And so then there'd be little old Miss so-and-so, sitting by herself in a little house with her nasal cannula for her oxygen. And I would have to go say, hey, how's it going? Do you have enough oxygen? Do you need more? What's going on? And then maybe recognize that her cannula was in the wrong way. And so I'd help her fix it. And then I'd go back to the doctor and say, oh, little Miss so-and-so had her cannula in the wrong way. I was able to fix it. So like, I'm providing you value. Look, I went and visited the patient and stuff like that. And I did really enjoy that. I thought it was a really fun connection of sales and customer service, really, and then caring for people. And I loved that part, and visiting with these little people who were sometimes all by themselves, and they'd tell me these long stories or whatever, just visit with them. So that was fun. I liked that.
Back to your personality trait, if you'll talk to anyone in the grocery line.
Exactly. I know.
But how did sales even enter the picture here? I mean, did you ever have, some people I know have hang up about sales and salespeople, like from a very young age, right? Did you ever have any of that? Like, oh, I don't want to go into sales, or other people like, no, I know sales. My dad was in sales. That's where the money is. So that's why I went into sales. What did just a friend give you the job, or?
No, I found it like in the paper. I mean, it was a very random job interview in a warehouse with some, lady that I just was like hit it off with, and she hired me. I mean, I don't know why. I didn't have any real sales experience. I think I did have it in my head that most people who make money are in sales. And my father-in-law was an investment banker. And I remember talking to him about that at one point and saying, should I get into that? Oh, is that a good idea? And I mean, again, like, are you good at math? Oh, no, not so much. Okay, maybe
you're good at talking to people. Oh,
I know. I mean, I probably could have done that, to be honest, but it sounded like a lot of work and a lot of tests and stuff. I didn't want to do it. So I thought, well, sales, if I start at this lower end job, so it wasn't pharmaceutical, it was medical devices. So basically I could get into the doctor's office faster because there would be a line of pharmaceutical reps and they'd have to put their name down on a paper and wait to have time to talk to the doctor. And I would just walk past and say, oh, I'm here as a medical device rep. And I would walk in, and for whatever reason, it was separate. And I had, I could wait back there and the doctor would come out of the office. I'd quickly say something to him or her and then, leave. And all the pharmaceutical reps were sitting there like, how did she just get to go by? So I loved, of course that was fun. But
wait a minute. Was that a real thing or is that just what you did?
No, that
Maybe
was like
you
a
just
real
had that
thing.
confidence, right? That you just burst.
No, I wish. No, I wasn't that confident. I wish. No, that was a thing. I didn't have to wait. They would say, oh, go on back. You have patience with the doctor. Like it was kind of a different connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you were checking on the patients and
exactly
making sure the device was working for them. Oh, I get it. So
there was a little bit of a deeper connection, I guess. So I don't know how or why, or I thought that was a good idea. It didn't last forever. I mean, I remember I got pregnant with Gray, my third, and got very lazy and did not go do all the rounds I was supposed to do. I mean, I was fired when I was pregnant. Like that didn't go well. So that was the end of that.
Yeah.
I think that all ended poorly. But anyway, it was a good gig while it lasted. And then, having kids, trying to figure out working, staying home, what's the balance there? There was a lot of back and forth with different, just trying to figure out what to do next. And so I fell into recruiting, and that again was a sales. Okay, I could probably do this because I've done sales. Let me get into recruiting. And I can remember I worked, gosh, I mean, this feels like eons ago, but I worked as a travel nurse recruiter for a while. And then I was stolen or poached from there to work at another recruiting place. And at that recruiting place, that was downtown, and we did accountants and, executives or executive assistants and accounting type jobs. And I didn't love sales, but I would do it. And we had to go through like the Denver Business Journal or the Yellow Pages, I mean, anything to find companies. And I mean, we did have the internet then too. So it wasn't that long ago, but we would use whatever list we could find. And I can remember we had to make 100 calls a day, 100. And I had the phone up to my ear and, you dial or whatever. And I went to put the phone down and my boss started snapping at me, female boss, and saying, like, don't put the phone down, just keep going, just dial again. Yeah, it was pretty intense. So that was interesting, very intense, very stressful, did not love it. And like you, I didn't call my sister, but I ran into a family friend on the elevator. And I said, oh my gosh, I forgot that your dad owns this insurance company in this building. Please hire me, please. And he was like, well, what do you know about health insurance? I said, absolutely nothing. I will learn whatever you want me to. Please just get me a job. And so we started talking over a few weeks, and I did some interviews and they hired me. And that's how I got into health insurance, which was what I did for 12 years before becoming a coach.
Wow. So is the key theme here, you just have to be desperate? You have to have that really bad
Yes.
job to get the good job, because then you're like, oh.
I think for me, it was all about, it's interesting because I coach about this a lot now. And so what I have recognized is that my path was all about trying to fit in. I just wanted to fit. I wanted to be a good recruiter. I wanted to be good at everything I ever did. I just didn't love it. So if you don't love it, if you don't find something about, I know I'm not saying people who are insurance brokers love insurance, but there's something about it that they do love. And so that's what brings them to work. For me, that was about working with the clients. I loved to help people. I loved to educate them, tell them about insurance. Hey, you could save so much if you did this, or have you ever heard of this thing? That's fun to be able to help people through their issues and figure out a solution. For me, though, I was always trying to fit in and be that corporate person, or I want to be good at sitting in a cubicle. And I hated that. I always hated it. And I never fit in. And I always tried to shrink myself to fit in. And when you do that, you're never going to be small enough. You're never going to be able to make yourself small enough to fit in. And a lot of that was not just the actual job. It was, maybe the manager, the supervisor, whoever I was working with, or just the feeling of the culture of the company, or the leadership was terrible, whatever those other components were. It wasn't necessarily just the job. I mean, I could be pretty good at entering data if I wanted to, but in that culture, it was oppressive and felt horrible. So who would want to do that?
Yeah.
For me, that's kind of what that all led to. And that did become desperate situations, because I would want to leave that company, but I knew that as a family with 3 boys, we needed extra money, we needed dual income type of thing. That was our decision. And I needed to find another job if I was going to leave this one. So it was always out of the pan into the fryer, out of the frying pan
Into the fire.
Whatever. So yeah, I was always like, oh, I've got to find something else. I've got to find something else, and pushing and trying to make things work. And then I got to a position or a place where I really needed help. I was really struggling, and I saw a psychiatrist, I remember, who of course is not the right person. And she would just sit there and look at me when I would vent everything to her. She was like, why are you here? Like, I'm not really the one to help you with this. You need a career coach. So I started working with a coach. And through that process, I was like, you are what I've always wanted to be. I wanted to be a psychologist or a therapist who helps people move forward and figured out what they love. And this is it. Like, oh my gosh, where did you come from? I've never heard of this profession before. So that was how I first heard about it. And I mean, from there, I got certified and did my own coaching, and just started like from there. So
yeah. So went through your own struggles and
yeah.
had someone help you, and then you're like, whoa, this is what I've been looking for. Do you think if you had known there was a career coach back when you got your psychology degree, you would have jumped there right away? Or do you think you needed to go through this journey and it kind of hit some pain points and real life things before it really made sense?
It's a good question. I think possibly, although I do remember working with a life coach, not quite as far back as then, but somewhere along the way before this career coach. And somewhere along the way, I worked with her. And I remember thinking she was just full of baloney and had nothing good to help me with, because of course at the time, and this is a big misnomer with coaching, is that I thought she was going to tell me what I needed to do. I thought she was going to say, oh, you are this, this, and this, and you should go be a teacher, or you should go do this, right? And she didn't do that. She was like, well, tell me what else you're interested in, and tell me what else you like and what don't you like, and you should be coming up with these ideas yourself. And I did not like that. And now that I'm a coach, I get that. And I think we talked about this the other day. Sometimes it's a blend, though, of let me give you a little insight, or let me tell you what I see, and you can do with that what you want. Now that I've heard, things that you've said, and really it's a lot about pulling out information from the person. But I can also say, you've said this, this, and this, that sounds like a fireman or whatever, this together. Oh, I never thought of it that way. So, I mean, I'm giving a different perspective too. So at the time, I don't think I wasn't quite ready. And, they say like, when you're ready to learn, the teacher will appear. I wasn't ready to see that. I do think I needed to go through some of these struggles, maybe not quite as many as I went through. I mean, Kathy, I was fired. My husband hates it when I tell people this. He's like, why do you have to tell everyone that? I said, because I think it's a good story that not everybody has to have an easy, I was promoted to CEO and when I was 22 kind of story. I was fired from a lot of jobs, like a lot, way more than I was not fired from. So it was a pretty shitty career, to be honest. It was terrible. I did not like it. I think what gives me the credibility, though, and the know-how of how to coach now, well, what do you know about coaching CEOs? I can tell you very easily and very well what not to do, because I've worked with a lot of terrible bosses and a lot of terrible leadership. And I mean, I'm certified, I've done the program, I get it too. It's not just about, I'm not telling a CEO how to be a CEO, but I am telling them, your energy is everything. And when you are texting people in the middle of a meeting, and then we ask you a question and you don't know what we're talking about because you're so busy on your phone, that might be a sign that you're a bad leader. So, right?
That might be a sign. Well, Candice, I want to go back to your sharing about being fired. Thank you for sharing that, because I
Sure.
gotta tell you, I had this perception for a lot of my life. That's the end of the world. Being fired,
Absolutely.
it could be the end of the world, but being laid off,
Yeah.
that's that you make these stories, just like how you said
Terrible.
about our conversation today. You make up these
Yeah.
stories about what's so bad. And, like when I navigated several navigate, I don't know if that's right, avoided several
Mhm.
layoffs in my corporation, because I was in the right place at the right time. I had the right skill set. I had this or that. But then I ended up in that spot where, oh, now I'm on the list. And you
Yeah.
kind of think, oh, it's never going to happen to me. And then you're like, yeah, it did. And then, and then you're not supposed to take it personal, because I knew I was part of all of these major, eliminate 1,200 people here, 5% of the team. I mean, that's why when I left, I'm like, I'm done. I'm taking the package and I'm going, because those last assignments were all about cost cutting
Horrible.
and just always cost cut. And that's always, you start with the people, even though
Mhm.
they're our greatest asset.
Mhm.
So it's, and you say it's not going to take it personal. I would leave going, oh yeah, I got the severance and I was kind of on the top of the world. And then I'd be like, oh, I got laid off.
Yeah.
It's, yeah.
Well, and nobody wants to admit it or say it. So they say, oh, I left or whatever. And I actually, it was really interesting at one of my last interviews. I was speaking with the woman who was hiring me, and she was a very down-to-earth woman. And we're still friends, really love her, still friends today. And she said to me, you said you left your last position and blah, blah, blah. And she said, I have to tell you, I have a friend over there. And she told me, you were fired. And so I basically just told her the real story. I was like, yeah, I had a horrible boss who was seriously toxic, misogynistic, microaggression, all those things, total asshole, and did not know how to manage anyone from Adam. I mean, he was promoted from an analyst position because the other boss had been promoted to a bigger leadership role. So he had to jump up into that position and had never talked to a person, let alone managed anybody. And so they wanted to hire me to be the person who would talk to the clients. And then he didn't know how to really manage me, or, it was just a bad situation. And as much as I do think he was a toxic jerk, I also feel like he was just in the wrong position. He was in the wrong seat on the bus. He was probably a brilliant analyst and a great guy, but just don't put him in that position. That turned him into a jerk,
Well, and did they give him any training or coaching
No,
to
nothing.
be successful, to say what you did before in that job, very different for what we're asking you to do now. So therefore,
Honestly,
in order to be successful, here's the new things you need to be doing. But no, you tend to be like, oh, well, I got promoted, I deserve this. And it's like, yeah, but not the way you were doing things before. It's a new job. Yeah, it's a very different.
Yeah. And I should have had, the red flags were all there. They had already hired and fired someone in my role, prior to me, within a month or something. I should have seen the writing on the wall. But anyway, I told her the story and I explained everything, and they still hired me. And I think they could see that it was a situational thing. When you get fired, though, it's very hard not to bash, blame. And so I think what got me that job, to be honest, was that I was very transparent. I said, he was XYZ and there was this issue with him and that's his problem. However, I did not show up at my best because, without blaming him, I can take responsibility and say, I had lost interest, for whatever reason, maybe it was him or whatever it was, I should have quit. And what I did was I told myself, it's fourth quarter. Nobody leaves insurance in fourth quarter. That's their busiest time. I've got to stay and help them get through this busy time, and then I'll quit. Well, hindsight's 2020. I'm sure they were looking at me like, what is her deal? She is so checked out. She does not want to be here. Why does she keep showing up every day? We should fire her. Right. So I get that now on this side of things. At the time, I thought I was doing them a favor by hanging out and helping them through that hard time, busy time. So I've learned a lot. And especially through all those firings, I've definitely learned a lot. I think it's not necessarily something you want to strive for, but it is the universe just telling you to move on. You don't fit there. I just should have learned, you really don't fit in insurance. or corporate, go find something else. Like that's the message. It took me a lot, you know, they say you keep getting the lesson until you learn it. It took me 12 years to really get it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 12 years is a good run though at a career. I mean, or at a
I thought so. I mean, yeah,
longevity for,
sure.
staying at a, that you
Yeah.
give it a good shot. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
did.
people are like, oh, 8 months, I'm done, or 12 months or 18, but it's
Yeah.
also, I had another interviewee talk about your shelf life at an organization. Well, actually, she said that and in a leadership role, because she was in a leadership role, that leaders have a shelf life and you have to figure out what is your shelf life. And hers was 5 years. I had another leader, hers was 18 months. She's like, I'm in, I'm out. And so she was kind of that change agent. And how do we set up the infrastructure to be successful? I don't want to run it. I'm a starter. I'm a setter upper. I'm a fixer too. She was. So you kind of have to know. And until you have enough data points in your life journey, I think you can't really figure out maybe what your strengths are, what you like, what you don't like. So, on one hand, the 18-month person, she's leaving maybe on her own accord, but that's the same as being fired, either way, there's a departure and moving on to something else. So,
I mean, I definitely learned a lot about myself during that time. I always thought that I was a detailed person, and I think I convinced myself of that and convinced people during the interview process of that. And I actually am terrible at that. And I am very quick to tell people that now. You want me to take notes for you? I mean, I take notes, but they're very different than what you might expect. And so you might want to take your own notes, right? So I'm very quick to point out, if you want someone to follow up with those people on that thing, you probably don't want me to do this, in any committee or board, or, we were talking the other day about other things.
Yeah.
Like there are things I'm not good at and I will need support or reminders or somebody to help, an assistant, whatever it is. So I figured that out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Figure out your strengths. Well, like that gentleman, that boss that you had, a strength of you, having you come in and be that face could work perfect, right? It's a yin and a yang, but if he's not acknowledging that that's a strength and that's what's needed and that you're adding value, they didn't value what you were bringing. And so that's very frustrating. Well, Candice, I could keep chatting with you all afternoon, which is why our lunches always go long. And why
I know.
The other day, I'm sorry about that. So we do need to start wrapping up. So I have a couple wrap up questions.
Okay.
So one is, when you look back on your career, what do you think served you best? And it could be a characteristic or a discipline, a habit, a strength. But what do you think now, when you look back, served you best?
I think what serves me best now is what hurt me then, if that makes sense. So
I like what serves me now. I like that.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I just put that together because I was going to say tenacity. So tenacity is a wonderful quality, characteristic that serves me now because I stick with my business. I stick with everything I'm doing. I am not giving up. Back then, I thought that was what you did. I thought you stuck with something. I thought you stayed in a career forever. You stayed with that company for 20 years. That's what you are striving for each time. And I wish I would have known then it's okay to leave. It's okay to say, this isn't working, I'm out. Instead, I waited until the point that it got so bad that I would get fired. And that is not the smartest way to go about business or a career. Yeah. Now, though, that serves me. It wasn't my husband. Somebody said there's a fine line between tenacity and delusion. Like, are you being delusional that this is going to work and so you're sticking with it, or are you being tenacious? And so I do think there is a fine line, but for me, it's tenacious and I'll keep doing it. So that's definitely something that serves me now. We'll put it that way.
Well, and there's also the, are you being tenacious or are you avoiding the hassle or the fear of maybe trying to find something new? If you still, if what's working isn't working, if what you're doing isn't working, it's hard to say, well, what is working and move into, oh, well, then I should be looking for X. You just kind of go, this isn't working. But you don't even know where to step next. But I guess that's why you need a leadership and success coach, right? Because they can talk you through that. And many times when you start talking through it, you would probably ask the questions, well, what are the things you enjoy? What gives you energy? What are your strengths? Next thing you know, well, why don't you look for a position in X? Then people can be in action versus I don't know what I want. This just isn't right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you said it well there. I think it all boils down to taking that first step, and whatever that is. Maybe it's going for a walk around the block just to clear your head for a minute. Taking action is how anything will move. Any energy needs action to move. And so even if you have clutter in your house, if you move that clutter from one pile to another, it's going to move things and start loosening it up like a knot in a necklace. It's going to create energy between the strands and let things loosen up. So I think that's a really good point about taking action.
Yeah. Yeah. And once you start kind of announcing that you're looking for something new, then new things start to come to you,
Yes.
or you start to open up and go, wait a minute, I'm driving to work. What's that company that I just passed? I hear good things about them, or I just saw their ad on TV, and yeah. Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, very cool. Okay. So last question then, any words of wisdom that impacted you at a point when you were maybe down or feeling stuck or in transition? Or maybe words of wisdom that you use with some of your clients, anything kind of that's impactful for you?
Well, this might sound cliche or trite or whatever, but this really helped me. And I remember I used to have this written down by my desk at one of my companies, which might have been why I was fired. But anyway, but it was that rejection. It's not rejection, it's redirection.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
And so when you're feeling like you've been rejected, whether it's from a job, a relationship, maybe just a sales call, they say, no, I won't, go hire somebody else. It's just redirection. It's just telling you that you need to go try something else, go try a different job, a different boyfriend, a different client, just keep moving, keep going through the process, and you're going to figure it out, and you're going to find the right direction. So I like to think about that when things don't work out the way I have planned.
Yeah, I like that. And that is a better, I think, way to look at it than when we both talked about, being fired was, the end of the world, or getting the word no, like when you're in sales, or if you're, trying to even just sell an idea to a boss, you think the word no, what's the worst thing that can happen? Where are they going to say no? I mean, some people are like, oh, so big deal. One of my words of wisdom was, you never, it's always no if you don't ask. So ask for what you want.
Right.
And, so when you kind of live your life in that way, then you don't care if you're like, well, so what if they say no? It was going to be no anyway. So if it's not no, or if it's tell me more, it's better than in my head, I had, well, they're just going to say no. And so anyway, I love that. So it's not rejection, it's redirection.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah. And I think, I know you had a question, not to keep talking, go back to your questions, but I know you had something about what does that voice, say to you, your inner voice. And I'll just kind of add in a little bit about that is, I think we are our biggest blocks. We get in our own way. And when we hear that a lot, we hear people say that, oh, I get in my own way. What does that even mean? And it's just our thoughts. And when we have our thoughts telling us, whether it's a little voice inside our heads or on our shoulder telling us that we're not good enough, or we're not smart enough, or you were never meant for this, or who do you think you are to do this, or I told you that wasn't going to work out. All of those little voices are just our thoughts. And so when we can change those thoughts and catch ourselves having those thoughts and those negative conversations with ourselves, that's how we're going to move forward. And so really thinking about, what would I tell Kathy? What would I tell a friend? Hey, that's not true. Look at how well you did XYZ. So come up with that ulterior evidence to help you get through that thought. And that's how you're going to shift things and get through that, that barrier.
Oh, well, thanks for going down that path. It's funny. One of those little words in there was, those were the things that my little voice always said to me.
Yeah, I'm sure. We all have them.
I've done a lot of work in a variety of classes and books, and just a lot of introspective, to really turn down that noise. First, be aware of when it's showing up, and that it doesn't have to stay there, and that I can reprogram it. So it's very powerful.
You'll never get rid of it necessarily, but you start to be, when you have that awareness, you recognize it a lot faster, and then you're able to get through it faster. So that's kind of the key to that.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, Candice, this has been so great. Every time I spend time with you, I just feel better. Feel better for the world, feel better myself, because there's someone like you out there that you can articulate it so well, and you can kind of make it, I can relate to it without you saying you need to do this. You know what I mean? There's a way about you. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for having me. It was really a pleasure. It's fun talking.
Well, awesome. Well, listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below so you'll be alerted when other interviews are published. And if you have any questions for me or for Candice, you can find this interview on my website under the blog section on lifestorycurator.com. And again, you can listen to the interview, watch the interview there, but I'll also post Candice's website and social media information so that you can get a hold of her. Because many of you might be thinking, maybe I need to bring her into my life. So bring a little success coach into your life. So, okay, on that note, let's stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing the stories. Have a great day.